My name is Samantha, and I've always made it a point to be upfront and honest about myself. I'm 32 years old, and I currently work as an account manager at a tech company where things are going quite well, even better than I could have imagined a few years ago, because I have a good salary and have saved enough to afford a few expensive but necessary things that make you feel like you're not just surviving, but truly living. 2 years ago, I made what felt like the best decision of my life, and I still remember the day I completed all the paperwork and realized I now had my own beach house. And it wasn't just somewhere near the water, but in a place where the ocean literally comes right up to the walls. The living room windows overlook an endless expanse of blue water that changes every hour. And there's nothing more peaceful than sitting in the morning with a cup of strong coffee on the small terrace, breathing in the salty air and listening to the waves roll toward the shore, sometimes noisily and anxiously, sometimes gently, as if trying not to wake anyone around. The house turned out to be quite small, rather cozy, but that's precisely why it became the perfect place for short escapes from the bustling city, for weekends or vacations when you want to close the door behind you and feel like you're in another world. I've probably spent almost every other weekend there over the past 2 years, and this rhythm became a kind of lifeline for me, helping me cope with fatigue, traffic jams, work emails, and endless client calls. Only there did I finally learn to breathe deeply again. My parents, David and Susan, are in their early 60s, and neither of them had the easiest lives. My father spent his entire life working hard in construction until his back finally gave out, and he's now on disability. And my mother works part-time as a cashier at a grocery store because she can't handle the full workload anymore, and the pay is so low. When I bought the beach house, I didn't hesitate to make them a duplicate key and told them they could come and stay whenever they wanted, because I wanted them to have a place where they could relax and feel happy, even if only for a little while. I still remember the look on my father's face when I handed him the keys, and the way his eyes filled with tears. I'd never seen him cry before, and it pierced me to the core, because I suddenly realized how few moments in his life he had had where he could even allow himself to be touched by joy. Since then, they've been going there about once a month, sometimes with my younger sister Emma and her husband Jake. Emma is 28 years old, works in a dental clinic, and has always been the one who connects easily with people, smiling, telling stories, and attracting attention. But she also often had a tendency to expect life to deliver everything to her. Jake is probably fine. He works in a warehouse, but no matter how often we talk, he always complains about his salary and how catastrophically short of money he has, though I try not to judge them for it, as everyone carries their burdens differently. They've only been married 3 years, but they've already used the beach house several times, mostly when they visited my parents, and I didn't mind because I felt that was the way it should be. The beach house belonged not just to me, but to our family. All this time, everything was going perfectly. My parents would call me after their trips, and my mother would repeat almost the same thing every time like a prayer, and I heard so much gratitude in her voice that my heart filled with warmth. "Samantha, I can't tell you how much this means to us," she would say, "to have a place to come, relax, and get away from all this chaos. You're such a good daughter." These words seemed to push me forward, giving me confidence that I was doing something right, that my efforts and money were turning into something more than just things, but a sense of security and joy for those I love. But about a year ago, everything suddenly changed. One day, a recruiter called me, and what started out as a casual conversation changed my life. He offered me a job, not just a promotion, but a position as a customer service director at a huge corporation, with a salary almost double my current one, and a benefits package many only dream of. Top-notch health insurance, a robust retirement plan, bonuses, and all the other guarantees. But there was one caveat, and I heard it so clearly, as if he'd deliberately paused. The position was in Portland, Oregon. I live in Florida, and that meant moving across the country, changing my familiar climate, lifestyle, and maybe even my social circle. I pondered this decision for weeks, vacillating between fear and delight, because I knew opportunities like this don't come around often, and turning it down would be foolish, almost irresponsible. Finally, I called my parents and told them about the offer, and surprisingly, they welcomed the news, especially my mother. "That's wonderful, honey," she said. "You deserve it. You've worked so hard." But then I had to say out loud what had been nagging at me all this time. "Mom, if I accept, I'll have to move to Oregon. I think I'll have to sell my apartment and the beach house. I'll need money to buy a place there." There was a heavy, unusually long pause in the phone conversation, and I was about to repeat my decision to sell when my mother spoke again, but her voice was different. It had a soft, pleading quality, a childish vulnerability I'd rarely heard before. "Samantha, maybe you shouldn't sell the beach house. I know it's asking too much, and maybe it's selfish, but Dad and I are so used to going there. It's become something important to us, a part of our lives." I froze, holding the phone to my ear, and at that moment my father intervened, his voice low, slightly muffled, but firm. "We could take care of everything, Samantha. We'd keep an eye on the house, the garden in front of the terrace, everything. We just adore this place." These words hit me harder than I expected because I suddenly felt it clearly. They were getting older, their strength waning, and there were fewer and fewer islands of joy in their lives, and this little house by the sea might be the brightest spot they'd ever known in years. How could I take that away from them? I closed my eyes and whispered into the phone, "Okay, I won't sell it. You can keep going." Their sigh of relief was immediately audible, and Mom almost sobbed, "Oh, thank you, darling. You have no idea what this means to us." I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, realizing I'd just changed my plan, but I'd done it for the sake of the two who once raised me and for their quiet happiness. So I decided to do something different. I sold my city apartment and moved to Portland, and instead of the house I'd dreamed of, I had to settle for a nice, spacious apartment. It was truly a great deal. New floors, a large kitchen, a high ceiling in the living room. But I knew that if I sold the beach house too, I'd have enough for a house with its own patio, garden, maybe even a veranda for afternoon tea. And yet every time I heard the happiness in my mom's voice and saw my dad come alive, I knew it was the right decision. I started my new job, and everything turned out exactly as the recruiters had promised. A high salary, incredible benefits, real growth prospects, new colleagues who gradually became friends. My life in Portland was developing remarkably well, and yet I kept in touch with my parents, calling them every couple of weeks, and the conversation invariably returned to the beach house. "We just got back from there," my mom said. "The weather was beautiful. Emma and Jake came with us, and we had a wonderful weekend." I smiled, imagining them all on the terrace, and replied, "That's wonderful, Mom. I'm glad you're enjoying it." "Yes, dear," she always repeated. "We really don't know what we'd do without him. Thank you for saving him for us." I heard these words again and again, and they confirmed to me that I had done the right thing. This went on for about a year. I was becoming more and more immersed in my new life, confidently climbing the career ladder, making new acquaintances, occasionally allowing myself to spend more than before, and only on rare evenings would I be overcome by a quiet longing for those mornings on the terrace by the ocean. But the thought that the house made my parents happy brought relief. I paid the property taxes and the utilities, which weren't exactly cheap, but I told myself, this was the price for their peace of mind, and it was worth it. And then came the call that changed everything. Rick's name appeared on the screen, the realtor who'd helped me buy my house 2 years ago, the man with whom I'd exchanged the occasional postcard and letter. His voice was friendly, but somehow cautious. "Hey, Samantha, how are you doing in Oregon?" "Listen, I have a question about your beach house." I was surprised, but I said, "Sure, Rick, what happened?" He sighed and said, "Yesterday I was browsing rental listings and came across one. It said someone named Emma was renting out your beach house. I thought maybe you'd asked her to manage the place or something, but honestly, the advert made it sound like she owned it." I was speechless. "Emma? My sister Emma?" "Send me the link." My voice broke. "Sure, "I'll send it right now," he replied. And right as I waited for the message, my hands started shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. When the text arrived and I clicked the link, my stomach dropped. The photos showed my little house, every detail, every room, the furniture I'd bought myself to make it cozy. It was all on display like a commodity. And right at the top of the ad, boldly highlighted, was Emma's phone number. The ad looked like it had been created by a professional agency, not my sister. It advertised the house as available for weekends, vacation weeks, or even special events, and the price was hefty, $300 a night during normal times and significantly higher during holidays and celebrations. I felt a wave of nausea rising in my veins as I scrolled to the testimonials. There were dozens of them, the earliest dating back at least 6 months, possibly longer, and every word written by strangers about my house cut to the heart. We had the most amazing weekend here. Emma was so helpful and accommodating, the house was exactly as pictured, and the beach access was incredible, already booking our next stay, wrote a woman named Sarah M. It continued, "We spent Christmas week here, and it was magical. Waking up every morning to the ocean was a dream. Working with Emma was such a pleasure. She was so accommodating, 5 stars." And signed, Jennifer L. I was choking with anger because it was Christmas when my family told me on the phone how they were there together, how wonderful everything was. But not a word was mentioned about the house being rented to strangers. I kept scrolling down, each new impression adding fuel to the fire. Great place for a work retreat, fast Wi-Fi, plenty of meeting space, beach, access perfect for evening strolls. Emma is easy and professional to work with, and more praise for my sister, who was supposedly the owner of my property. But what really threw me off was one particular review. "We're already dreaming of having our wedding here. Emma said the house could be used for events and special occasions. It's the perfect location for an outdoor ceremony. We can't wait to discuss the details." Signed, Katie and Brandon. At that moment, my head spun and I froze, staring at my laptop screen, unable to believe what I was seeing. My sister was making money off my house, which meant my parents knew it, and all these months they'd been lying to me over and over again when we talked on the phone, repeating words of gratitude, masquerading as love. I grabbed the phone and dialed my mom. I needed to make sure I could hear the truth right now. "Hey, honey, how are you doing in Portland?" Her voice was so calm it almost made me want to throw up. "Okay, Mom. Listen, I was thinking, maybe I'll take a vacation next week and come home and spend a few days at the beach house. It's been so long." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then I heard shuffling around the kitchen, as if she were stalling for time. "Oh, well, that would be great, of course, but you see, Emma and Jake are there right now. They really needed a break from all the stress at work." A lie. Another lie. Holding the phone to my ear, I opened the booking calendar linked to Emma's listing with my other hand and saw that the house was indeed occupied for the entire week by a Mr. Patterson. "Okay, maybe next week then?" I said as calmly as I could. Mom hesitated. "Well, I'm not sure about their plans. You know how it is. Maybe it's better for you to call them directly." I could hear in her voice the desire to end the conversation and move on. "Actually, Mom, I've changed my mind," I said, feeling a burning sensation inside. "I think I'd rather go somewhere else. Maybe Hawaii." The relief in her voice was too evident. "Oh, that sounds wonderful, honey. So much more exciting than our little beach house. You deserve a real vacation." She quickly added that it was time to make dinner and hung up. I sat in silence, holding the phone in my hand and staring at the blank screen. My insides rang with pain and anger. My family had lied to me. Not just Emma, but Mom and Dad too. They were all involved. I called Rick back, and he answered immediately, as if he'd been expecting my call. "Hey, Samantha, I saw the ad and it's a really complicated situation," he said softly but firmly. I immediately thought something was wrong. "What are you going to do about it?" I gripped the phone and confessed, "I don't know, Rick. I still can't believe they're doing all this behind my back. I pay all the bills for this house, the taxes, the utilities, every little thing, and they're quietly profiting off it. He paused for a second and then said, "Samantha, do you realize you can legally sue them? What they're doing is illegal. They're essentially stealing from you." I exhaled sharply. I don't want to sue my family. That's the last thing I want. I understand, he replied, but you have to have options. Look, let me dig through my contacts. Maybe I can find out when they plan to rent the house again. You can catch them red-handed, present evidence they can't deny. For the first time in a long time, the idea made sense to me. Okay, Rick, let's give it a try. See what you can figure out, I said, and my heart felt a little better. But the next 2 weeks were torture. I couldn't get my mind off what my family was doing, couldn't stop thinking about how they'd been lying to me all these months, looking me in the eye through video calls and assuring me that everything was perfect, that the house was their little paradise, and I rejoiced right along with them. Every time I looked around my Portland apartment, the same thought came to mind. If I'd decided to sell the beach house back then, I would have my own house with a garden, maybe even a fireplace, instead of these white walls. I felt cheated and used, and it hurt to the point of tears. Exactly 2 weeks later, Rick called again. "Samantha, I have some information for you. Are you sitting up?" His voice was serious, almost solemn. "Yes, go ahead," I replied, trying to remain calm. "Your sister has booked the house for a wedding." A big wedding. A friend of mine works with event planners and said they're talking about 100 guests. It's in a month, and judging by the rates, they're charging serious money. We're talking thousands of dollars. I felt a cold anger slowly fill my chest, like blood rushing in my ears. They weren't just renting out the house to tourists for the weekend. They'd built an entire business out of it, a large-scale and profitable one at that, and all behind my back. "Rick, do one more thing for me," I said, my voice unexpectedly firm. "Find me tenants. Someone who wants to live in the house for a long time, for several months. I want them to move in before the wedding." "I can try," he replied after a pause. "Give me a week or two." "Okay, and Rick, please don't tell anyone about this yet." Another 2 weeks passed, and he called again, this time with a hint of joy in his voice. "I found the perfect match for you. David and Sarah. They both work online, freelance, and are looking for a beach house for 6 months. They're willing to pay good money." I closed my eyes and exhaled. Perfect. I'll fly there myself to meet them. I booked a vacation, bought a ticket to Florida, and didn't tell any of my family. I hadn't returned home since the day I left for Oregon, and the thought of arriving silently, unannounced, burned me with both dread and anticipation. The first thing I did upon landing was head straight to the beach house. I had those original keys in my hand, and my heart was pounding so hard, as if I were stealing something from myself. When I pulled up and saw the facade, a strange feeling washed over me. It was still the same, as if time had stood still there, and yet it was my home, the one I'd owned and paid for while my family profited from it. I called a locksmith, and that same day he changed all the locks. A simple act, but it gave me back control of my property. Then I met with Rick and the future tenants. David and Sarah were a pleasant couple, smiling and calm, and they immediately made it clear they understood the complexity of the situation. "We know this might upset your family," Rick said right in front of them, "so I want you to think it through." Sarah smiled, but her eyes flashed with determination. "We're fine with it. We love this house and the location, and we're not easily intimidated." I nodded, looking at them and feeling a mixture of relief and dread well up within me. Good. Because this could end badly. I sat on the terrace after the locksmith had finished, and the new locks clicked shut with a tight turn of the key, and I felt like I was breathing deeply for the first time in a long time. But at the same time, I was terrified, because I knew perfectly well that my parents, Emma and Jake, wouldn't let it go. They'd grown accustomed to considering this house a part of their lives, as if it belonged to them, and the realization that everything was now under my control was a blow they hadn't expected. The next day, I met with David and Sarah, and we talked for a long time on the terrace. while the sea breeze wafted the scent of salt in my face and the waves gently crashed against the shore. They reaffirmed their readiness to move in a week as soon as they packed up and wrapped up their business, and that they were happy with a long-term lease because for their work, it was important to have a stable place where they could live peacefully without having to move at any moment. I told them everything honestly, not hiding the possibility that my family might show up and try to cause a scene. And Sarah looked at me with that serious, feminine directness that made my heart tremble and said, "We're adults, Samantha, and we understand we're entering into a conflict, but you must remember, this is your home, and you have every right to decide what happens here." These words warmed me, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. We signed all the papers, Rick helped with the deed, and as I signed, something clicked in my chest. It was a moment of regaining control of my life, not just my property, but at the same time, thoughts of the wedding, of the 100 people they were planning to bring to my beach, of the music, laughter, and toasts that would be heard in the place where I dreamed of peace and quiet, kept nagging at me. That evening, I sat with my phone in my hand, debating whether to call my mother, even though I knew perfectly well the conversation would end the same way as last time, with hesitations, omissions, hasty excuses, and finally, relief in her voice when I agreed to back off. I dialed her number several times and deleted it again, and finally simply texted Rick, "They don't know I'm here, and let's keep it that way for now." I spent the next few days in the house, reclaiming the space, the corners of which still hung with the memory of my parents and sister, their visits, dinners, their laughter on the terrace. I opened closets and found strangers' towels, dishes, even candles with wax residue. Every such small object resonated with a pang of betrayal because it was proof that they had lived here not as guests, but as hosts, and yet they had never once told me the truth. When it was time to meet David and Sarah for the final handover of the keys, I suddenly felt a sense of unease. Deep down, I knew that this was the moment the real confrontation would begin because my family would definitely show up. They had their own plans, and if they failed, it would be catastrophic. I handed the couple the new keys, showed them where everything was, explained the washing machine, the internet, the electrical outlets, every little detail, and they looked grateful and even a little excited, as if they were moving not just into a house but into a new chapter of their lives. That same evening, I walked onto the beach, walking barefoot on the wet sand, watching the sun set into the water, painting the sky golden pink. I thought about how everything would soon change, that the confrontation I had long feared, but now inevitable, lay ahead. I felt my family already somewhere nearby, that they would learn about the new tenants and come here demanding an explanation, and I would have to face them face to face without hesitation or tears. And when I lay down that night in my own home for the first time in months, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and strength spreading somewhere deep within me, as if the ocean beyond the wall was whispering to me that a storm was coming, but I had the courage to weather it. When I said those words, there was a deathly silence on the line, only Mom's slow, heavy breathing reminding me she was still on the line. And in that pause, I clearly felt how far we'd come from each other, not in the miles between Portland and Florida, but in the fact that we'd ceased to be a family that trusted each other and told the truth, and had become people standing on opposite sides of a wall of lies and money. "Samantha, you don't understand," Mom finally whispered, her voice laced with desperation, as if she were clinging to a thin thread that was about to snap. "Dad and I have expenses, medications, bills, and Emma and Jake are barely making ends meet. They have loans. The car broke down. We had to figure something out. We didn't want to hurt you. We thought we could slowly, without any problems." "Slowly?" I interrupted her, my heart pounding so hard it was ringing in my ears. "You turned my house into a hotel. Weddings, parties, rentals, every weekend. This isn't slowly, Mom. This is business. And all this behind my back." A man's voice, rough and tired, came on the other end, and Dad joined in. Samantha, honey, stop yelling. We just wanted to help Emma. She never had your acumen. She doesn't know how to build a career like you. And the house was empty, so we decided to, well, use it. You rarely came over after all. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white and almost shouted, "It was empty because I live in another state. But that doesn't mean it's suddenly yours. I trusted you with the keys, and you turned that trust into a way to make money off me." There was another pause on the other end of the line, but now I could hear my mother's sobs, quiet, broken, the kind that would have broken my heart at another time, but now only intensified my anger. "Samantha, please," she finally spoke, her voice breaking. "If we call off this wedding, we'll be in a terrible situation. These people have already paid. They're expecting a celebration, and we don't have the money to pay it all back. It will destroy us." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling waves of anger crashing against my inner walls, and I replied coldly, "Maybe it won't destroy you, Mom. Maybe it will destroy what's left of our family, because what you did to me has already destroyed me." There was a silence on the other end, so thick that I could hear a train passing somewhere far outside the Portland windows, and that silence was more terrible than any words. I knew they were waiting for me to give in, to put their interests ahead of mine again, but for the first time in my life, I had no desire to back down. "I'm not canceling the lease," I said firmly, almost in a whisper, but every word sounded like the blow of a hammer. "The house is occupied, period. If you got involved in this wedding scam, then you're on your own." I heard my mother's short intake of breath, as if I'd struck her with something sharp, and then Emma's angry voice clearly bursting from the other line. "You have no right, Samantha. This isn't just your house. We've all lived there. We've all spent time there, and we deserve our share. You only think about yourself." I laughed, but the laugh was bitter, like rust in my mouth. My share? Emma. This house was bought with my money, bought with my work and my sacrifices. You didn't invest a penny in him, but you did invest lies and deceit. And now it's all over. Emma was shouting something, but I wasn't listening anymore. I hung up and put the phone on the table, and at that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt not only anger, but also a strange relief, as if a door had closed inside me that had been engulfing me in pain for years. But with that relief came the realization. They wouldn't stop. The wedding was in 5 days, and they would fight to the bitter end to get their $5,000, which meant the real storm was yet to come. I heard my mother start crying on the phone, a thin, broken cry that seemed to be coming from the very depths of her soul, but even it couldn't shake my resolve, because I knew that if I gave in even a little, they would again exploit my weakness, my compassion, and my desire to maintain peace in the family. "Please, Samantha, you have to help us," she sobbed. "Can't you ask your tenants to leave for at least one weekend? We'll compensate them for the inconvenience." I almost laughed into the phone at the absurdity of her words, but instead I said evenly, "No, Mom, don't even think about it. You should be explaining this to the people you promised the wedding to, not me." She was choking on her tears, but she continued to plead, "Samantha, please. These people are threatening to sue us if we can't provide a venue." I took a deep breath, trying not to lose my temper, and answered coldly, clearly, "This is what happens, Mom, when you take money for something that doesn't belong to you." Then I hung up. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, but a strange feeling of liberation spread through my chest, as if I had finally broken free from the clutches of a lie. Yes, it was hard, but at the same time, I felt like I was doing the right thing. Definitely. Finally, they knew that I knew everything. The phone kept ringing, the screen flashing again and again. First Emma, then Dad, then Mom again. I ignored each call, as if it were a persistent knock on the door, behind which danger lurked. Then the messages came pouring in, one after another. Emma, "Samantha, you're ruining our lives. We need that money." Dad, "Your mom is beside herself. How can you do this to us?" Emma, "The bride's father is threatening to sue us for fraud." "Scam, Samantha. Are you going to arrest us?" And again from Mom, "Please, honey, we'll do anything. Just help us this once." I looked at the screen, sighed, turned off the phone, and went to bed. And for the first time in weeks, I slept truly well. Without anxiety, without heavy thoughts, without this constant feeling that someone was sitting on my shoulders, demanding that I carry everything for others. The next morning, when I turned on the phone, I saw 17 missed calls. 17. I listened to one voicemail from Mom, and it was filled with panic and despair. "Samantha, it's Mom. I beg you. The bride's family wants a refund and a cancellation fee because the wedding date is so close. They want $8,000. We don't have that kind of money. Please, you have to help us. You're the only one who can fix this." $8,000. I almost laughed out loud. They'd backed themselves into a corner, and now they were hoping I'd pull them out by the hand, like I'd done before. Part of me, frankly, felt sorry for them. After all, they were my parents. After all, I grew up in a house where Mom cooked dinners and Dad built fences, and I knew they weren't villains, just people who'd made terrible choices. But then I remembered all the months, all the bills I dutifully paid while they hid behind my back, pretending to be grateful for my generosity, when in reality they were profiting off my trust. I dialed Mom's number. "I won't give you $8,000, I said immediately before she could get a word in. "Samantha, please." Her voice trembled. "We're desperate. They're going to sue us." "You should have thought of this before." I tried to speak evenly, though my insides were seething, before taking money for something that wasn't yours and that you couldn't control. "We thought we could guarantee it." Her voice was pained. "Everything worked fine only because I didn't know about it, Mom. But now I know, and this is punishment." "You're punishing us," she whispered. "I'm protecting my property, Mom." "That's all," I replied. "Your father could lose the house." She tried to appeal to my pity. "We'll have to take out a loan we can't repay." For a second, it was as if a piece of ice had touched my heart. But then I remembered it was their choice. They chose to lie to me. They chose to take money they couldn't repay. "It's not my fault, Mom," I said quietly but firmly. "You're our daughter," she sobbed, "and you should help us. And you should be my parents," I interrupted her. "Parents who don't lie to their children." I didn't let her answer. I simply hung up and without a second thought, blocked all their numbers. For me, this conversation was over. A week later, when life was beginning to settle into a rhythm and I was trying not to think about the storm raging in Florida, my aunt, my mother's sister, Patricia, called. Her voice was worried but gentle. "Samantha, I heard what happened with your parents in the beach house," she said. "They said you cheated them and left them with nothing, losing $8,000. I nearly choked with indignation, but calmly, step by step, I recounted the whole story. Everything. The rent, the lies, the wedding, my bills. When I finished, there was a long, heavy silence on the line. "I had no idea they were doing that," Patricia finally said. "Samantha, I'm so sorry. Your mother made it sound like you suddenly decided to be cruel to them for no reason. They lied to me for months." My voice shook, but no longer from anger, but from exhaustion. "They made money off my house while I paid all the bills." "It's terrible," she replied, and there was so much sincerity in her words that for the first time in a long time, I felt relief. "I can't believe they did this to you." And it was comforting to know that at least someone understood my side of the story, that I finally didn't look like a villain to others, but simply a woman tired of being deceived. A few days after talking with Patricia, the phone rang again, and an unknown number appeared on the screen. I almost hung up, thinking it was another attempt to reach me under false pretenses, but something inside me told me to pick up. "Samantha?" I immediately recognized the voice. It was my mother, and it sounded as if she were speaking through tears. "We have problems." Real problems. We had to tell the bride and groom that we can't afford a ceremony venue. We had to charge $8,000 to their credit card. The interest rate is 24%. We'll never be able to pay it off. We'll lose everything. The house, the car, everything. She was sobbing loudly now, and her every intonation was filled with despair. "Please, you have to help us. You're our daughter." I was silent for a few seconds, trying to contain the mixture of anger and bitterness, and then said slowly and firmly, "I'm your daughter, Mom, the same daughter you lied to for months." She interrupted hastily, "We were wrong." "We know we were wrong. But please, we're begging you. $8,000 is nothing to you in your new job." I closed my eyes, holding back a scream, and replied, "It's not nothing to me. I worked hard for every dollar I get now, and even if it was a pittance, why should I pay for your mistakes?" "Because we're family," she sobbed. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Family doesn't lie to each other, Mom. Family doesn't steal from each other." There was silence on the other end. "Mom, I gave you something truly valuable, free use of a beach house. Do you even realize how much that costs? A beach vacation costs thousands of dollars every year, and instead of being grateful, you decided to be greedy." "We needed money," she whispered. "Then you should have asked me." "If you needed money, you could have spoken to me openly instead of going behind my back." For a moment, it was so quiet I could hear her breathing, and then Mom asked a question that made me stumble inside. "What if we had asked? Would you have let us rent the house?" I froze and my heart sank. I didn't know what to say. Maybe I wouldn't have agreed, but at least then they would have been honest. "I don't know, Mom," I finally said, "but you didn't even try. You chose to cheat. Please, Samantha. We're sorry. We'll never do anything like that again." Her voice sounded like she was about to fall to her knees right then and there. I clenched my teeth and said, "You're right, Mom. You won't do it again because you no longer have access to my house." She suddenly stopped crying. Her voice changed, becoming cold, alien. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the house is rented out to long-term tenants. You'll never be able to use it again," I replied. There was a pause, and then Mom muttered, "We'll fight this. We'll hire a lawyer." I laughed dryly and bitterly. "Go ahead, hire one. I'd really like to see you explain to the judge that you were illegally renting out someone else's property." She couldn't take it anymore and hung up. For the next few days, the phone didn't stop ringing. Calls from various unknown numbers poured in, one after another. I immediately realized it was Emma, Jake, and even Dad trying to reach me, calling from other people's phones. I didn't pick up once. Then the messages started, coming from random numbers, as if they thought I wouldn't recognize their style. "Samantha, it's Emma. You've ruined our lives. We had to take out a loan to pay off the wedding planners. Because of you, Mom and Dad are going to lose their house." Then, "It's Dad. I never thought my own daughter would be so heartless. We raised you better. And also, Samantha, it's Jake. Emma has panic attacks. You need to fix that." I looked at these words with surprising calm and then simply blocked all new numbers. A week passed. The phone rang again, but this time I saw a name on the screen. Patricia. I picked up. "Samantha," she said softly, "I wanted to give you an update. Your mother is now telling everyone it's your fault. She claims you forced them into this situation because you were selfish with the house." I smiled bitterly. Let her say what she wants. Anyone who knows the real story will understand where the truth lies. Patricia sighed. "I told a few people what really happened. Your cousin Mark was shocked. He said he couldn't believe they did this to you." I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. "Thank you for standing up for me, Patricia." "Of course, dear. What they did was wrong, and no one should let their family treat them like that." And in that moment I felt, for the first time in a long time, that I was no longer alone against everyone. 2 weeks later, when I'd almost gotten used to the silence, the phone buzzed again, displaying an unfamiliar number. I sighed heavily. I was tired of this endless game of cat and mouse, but something told me it was best to answer, to perhaps settle the matter once and for all. "Samantha," my mother's voice came through the phone, cold, devoid of any warmth. "We need those $8,000. We can't afford this kind of credit card interest." I felt a wave of anger rising inside me again and responded sharply, "Then maybe you should have thought about that before starting your little business at someone else's expense." Her tone instantly changed, becoming caustic, almost poisonous. "You know what? We don't need you. We can handle this ourselves. And when we do, don't expect us to forgive you." I laughed shortly and bitterly, as if something inside me had snapped. "I don't expect anything from you, Mom." She seemed to seize on my words. "Good, because you really won't get anything. You're a selfish and ungrateful daughter, and we're done with you." I sat up in my chair, smiled to myself, and replied firmly, "Well, at least we agree on something." She hung up, and this time I didn't even feel pain, only tired relief. I waited for more calls and messages, but they stopped. It seemed they finally realized I wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. To make sure the house was in order, I called Rick and asked how David and Sarah were. He answered, almost smiling, "Great tenants, no problems. They like it so much they're already asking to extend the lease." "What about my family?" "Any trouble with them yet?" I asked cautiously. Rick chuckled. "No, I think your sister just drove by once, but that's all. It seems they've resigned themselves to the fact that the house is not coming back to them." 6 months have passed since then. David and Sarah renewed the lease for another year, and now they're regularly transferring me $2,500 every month, which makes my life noticeably easier and more peaceful. My parents and Emma haven't contacted me since that last call. Sometimes Patricia keeps me updated. Mom and Dad are still mired in credit card debt, but somehow managing to get by while Emma and Jake were forced to move to a cheaper apartment. And, of course, Mom continues to tell everyone that I'm the villain in this whole story, that I turned my back on the family for money. Well, let her talk. I know what really happened, and that knowledge is more important than anyone else's opinion. I don't miss that endless drama. I don't miss the lies I was fed, and I certainly don't miss the humiliating feeling of repeatedly catching myself trusting people for whom I was merely a convenient source of profit. My life in Portland is going surprisingly well. My work is joyful and fulfilling. I got a promotion last month, and now I'm earning more than I ever imagined. And my beach house, which used to be just an expense for me, is finally bringing in a steady income. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about going there, seeing what it looks like now, maybe having tea with David and Sarah on the porch and listening to the sound of the surf. But honestly, I'm not ready to go back to Florida yet. There are too many difficult memories associated with that place. And yet, I've learned one very important truth from this story. Being part of a family doesn't give people the right to use you or control your life as they please. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you the most. Would I do it all the same if I could turn back time? Yes, I think so. Because they made their choice, and I made mine. And I don't have to correct someone else's mistakes, especially if those mistakes involve deceiving me and stealing from me. Now my home is in good hands, and David and Sarah send me photos from time to time of how they've decorated the garden and kept it in perfect order. They've even added a few lovely touches that make the place even more cozy. They recently wrote that they're considering buying their own place nearby, but for now they're happy where they are, and that knowledge fills me with peace. After all, despite everything that happened, I've managed to reclaim what's mine and turn it into a source of joy, not pain.